Hey friends, I like you keep books on my nightstand. There might occasionally be some where you start reading, and while you might have started reading it so you could fall asleep, you find that you really want to stay awake and keep reading it. Recently, I had one of those experiences. It was a book that came out last year. You might be familiar with it. It's called The Road Back to You. Ian Morgan Cron, Suzanne Stabile have written this book, and it studies what's called an Enneagram. And basically, it's just a way to think about your unique personality using 9 different categories. And I read the book and I loved it, but I'm going to totally be honest with you. I know nothing about this stuff. And so to tell you exactly what's in the book, what it means, I brought on, bringing in today, Dr. Carlus Gupton. He has all kinds of specialization and personality profiles, tests. Welcome in. Tell me, what's going on in this book?
Okay, it's a really great book. Let me hold it up so people can see it again. There we go, The Road Back to You, Ian Cron, Suzanne Stabile. It's very fine. This book has popularized in broader circles what's been used for actually many, many years, many decades, in environments where people are trying to understand their personality type, but particularly how their own spirituality is expressed in their personality type. Now, let's go back to what Enneagram is. Ennea, 9, gram, picture. Okay, so you can imagine another way of saying that is a ninograph. All right, 9 personality types. Okay, by number, that depending on whose version of it you use, actually has a name attached to it. And I'll get to some of those names in just a moment because Cron and Stabile have their own names that they've attached to each of the 9. Now, if you imagine a big circle, we probably should have had a great big Enneagram thing behind us, but we don't. So what you have to imagine is a big circle, like a clock, okay? And at the top is type 9, and then it goes 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
A pizza with 9 slices.
That's right, yeah.
And just imagine.
There you go. 9 personality types, all right? And the idea is that you tend to be primarily one of those types, but you have a relationship with all the other types, and the relationship is sort of spelled out as to exactly what is meant by that. Now, we don't know where the Enneagram comes from. We know some of the Desert Mothers and Fathers use something, at least it seems to be similar to the Enneagram. It has some little touches of ancient Greek wisdom, and of course, what we have today, it's really strongly influenced by modern psychology. And so it's sort of a hybrid of a whole lot of different things, and it grows, it changes, it adapts. I mean, it's something, and you find different versions of it, which is really interesting too, which is part of the reason why when you take it, you should take more than one version of it, take it in the context of community, do a lot of discussion about interpreting it so that you know your type and that sort of thing. But also understand it's not scientifically validated. It's not like DISC or Myers-Briggs or some of these others and it's not to say that all of those are scientifically validated, but they have a little more scientific validation to them. So like, for example, if you take the DISC and you take a scientifically validated version, you come out with there having been some kind of testing indicating that it's an accurate measure of what it's supposed to be measuring. Right? Same way with Myers-Briggs and some of the others. Well, the Enneagram is different. It is a personality profile, yes, but it's not scientifically validated. And I really think if it were, it would sort of take away a little bit of the value, as I'll comment here in just a moment. I think that part of its value is that it isn't that, and that it points to somewhat of the fluidity of the human experience and of human behavior. And one thing to understand too, and this is really important, because I think a lot of conservative Bible-believing Christians look at this graph. This thing with 9 different personality types, and it's got all these arrows pointing towards kind of a symmetrical symbol that looks almost occultic, or whatever. Just back away from that, because that's really not what it is. All those are designed to do, all those arrows are designed to do, is to show the interrelationship of each type to 2 or 3 other types within the graph, and there tends to be this fairly standard relationship that if you're a 9, you've got a special relationship to 2 or 3 other types, and those arrows help you to see it. And it's fairly symmetrical in that respect. So when people look at it, so you got to back away from that, and then to understand that it is something that's being used by a lot of folks for some really significant growth. And I have to admit, I mean, I do lots of profiling, lots and lots of profiling. DISC and Myers-Briggs and StrengthsFinder and conflict styles and all this kind of stuff that I use. But this particular profile, for what it measures it better than anything I've ever seen.
Okay,
it's really good.
Because like DISC has been around, Myers-Briggs, but
Right.
like if you go to a church right now, you offers Myers-Briggs on a weekend, 6 people are going to show up, and they're all related to the presenter.
That's right.
And this thing, a church does a workshop on this, and 300 people my
That's
age
right.
are showing up.
That's right.
What is it telling people that is so attractive?
Yeah.
What is it?
Well, I think it's the value of the Enneagram and what it does. And let me try to describe it in as brief a way as I know how. So you got your type. You got your major type.
And so let's share here. For example, if you're using this book, some of
Yeah.
the types would be
Yeah.
there's a challenger,
Yeah.
peacemaker, perfectionist,
Right.
helper, performer, romantic,
Right.
investigator, loyalist, and enthusiast. Those are kind of the types we're talking about.
Yeah, yeah. And what Cron Stabile have done is they've taken the numbers and they've assigned a word
Right.
to it. Now, it depends. If you take a different version, they'll attach different words to the same thing. All right, so that's what's important. And another thing, let me reiterate. If you take their version, you might end up with one interpretation. You take another version, you wind up with another. And that's part of the reason why people call it pseudoscience. You see that? Well, just back away from the idea of science, okay, and see it as something that's intended to be interpreted in the context of Christian community and people who know you, so that through the trial and error, you find the one that you believe truly is a representation of you.
What do you mean to take in the context of community?
Okay, let me come back to that.
Okay.
Because you asked about the value.
Yeah,
Why are people attracted to this? And I think a variety of reasons. But I think the big reason why is because when you take DISC, when you take Myers-Briggs, when you take some of these other profiles, whether we realize it or not, we have a tendency to convey those things and interpret those things as a matter of fixed designations. That, well, I'm a D, or I'm an ENTJ, or I'm an INFP. And even those who cover it in, who look at the Myers-Briggs will tell you that if you're a Myers-Briggs at the age of 16, particular type, you're going to be that when you're 32 or whatever. The Enneagram points to the fluidity of human behavior. So, for example, you are one particular type, all right, but then you have what's called a wing. And a wing is either the one that is to the right or to the left of your main type. And which wing you have depends on when you take the profile and you walk through. For example, I'm a 3, okay? And as a 3, I can either have a wing 2 or a wing 4. Well, the most accurate presentation, I think, for me is wing 4. I think that's a more accurate presentation. Now, what that means is that there is almost seamless superhighway between those two types for me. I can operate with one. I tend to operate within 3, but my wing is 4. So I've got that pretty clearly. But what that helps me to understand is that depending on the situation I'm in, depending on the context I'm in, or whatever, it helps me to understand how my behavior has a tendency to change. And so the fluidity of human behavior is one thing that matters. Now, in addition to that, you have not only a wing, but you also have a stress number and a security number. And that's where that special graph comes in.
Yeah.
All right. The special graph comes in that, say, like if you're, whatever, I'm a 3, which my stress number means 9 is a 9, and my security number is a 6. Now, stress number is the behavior that you tend to go into when you get really stressed or anxious, sort of pressed into a corner. All right. But then your security number is what you tend to migrate toward in your behavior when you're feeling pretty good. You're not stressed. It's the opposite of the anxious number or the stress number, when you're just feeling really great about stuff. And I'm giving myself as an example because I think it helps, but when I looked at that, I thought, okay, I'm a very direct, personality type. How in the world would somebody like me be interested in conflict resolution, which I teach, and have taught for a number of years? Well, the 9, my stress number, is peacemaker.
Right.
Right? And so that it helped me to get that. It helped me to understand that. Now, one other thing that is the attraction to this is that there is a shadow side to every individual type. A shadow side, sometimes referred to as the dark side, or the way Cron and Stabile describe it is, it's the deadly sin that's associated with a particular type. And what they do is they take the classic 7 deadly sins, okay, and then they'll try to assign one to a particular type or whatever, and that's helpful. But it really does help you to see from a spiritual perspective there's a sin tendency, a strong temptation with each individual type. And man, when I went through that, I thought, now I get it. Understand? And I think it's that sense of discovery that comes into people when they take this thing that's the real attraction to it. And I think that's part of the reason why it's real popular in church circles.
And I think one thing is, we'll get you back to the community thing, but one thing that's popular is it's strengths-based in that it doesn't start by diagnosing your personality with your problems.
That's true.
It tells you at the end of the chapter, here's part of the dark side.
That's right.
But it's so much of personality studies is how to fix what's broken about you.
Yeah.
And it doesn't always give you the resources to fix it.
That's exactly
because
right.
you start off broken.
It's very positive. It's not deficiency based.
What is when you say do it in community? I think this is real important. This isn't just me sitting down on the internet, kind of surfing around and figuring out why I am who I am. Tell me about it.
That's true, and I think that the way I've heard it expressed, which I think is really, really good, I think it needs to be used in the context of sanctified community, or a community of sanctification, relationships of sanctification. Like, for example, if I'm a particular type and I find myself going in there, well, it's nice if those people who love me and know me are able to say, you're doing that, yeah, because you have that tendency, but who also are able to hold me accountable to that and help me to see that I need to use whatever knowledge I gain from this so that I can contribute most in my context to human flourishing. And if I'm not using it in that way, then it's really not to any advantage. And it's not just this navel-gazing deal to where you're constantly looking inside yourself and saying, okay, this is, really, really great. This is, I just love all this self-discovery and that sort of thing. It'd be easy in our culture for people to use it in that way. But I would say it needs to be used in the context of community. I think context of community not only in terms of how you use it and how you use the benefit of what you gain, but also in the sense of how you actually land upon the most correct interpretation of the Enneagram in your context.
And so this can be, I almost feel guilty, like this is the best book I've read this year, and yet this book was about me. I feel like a narcissist. Did I like this because the book was about telling me why I am who I am? Tell me, how do I read things like this? How do I do personality profile and not land on being a narcissist? How do I take this and use it for ministry and for the good of others, like you said, some human flourishing sorts of things,
right? And
not just say, this is great because I got to read about myself the whole time.
Yeah, I think that's really good. I think sometimes that is a fear. That's a fear that academics and others who look at it say, well, we don't want to do that. If you tend to be naturally skeptical, you look at that and say, it's just a bunch of people navel-gazing. That's my term for the narcissist sort of thing. And I would say this: narcissism is if it's a lack of self-awareness. I mean, they're very self-conscious, but a narcissist is not really self-aware, and also will tend to not really care that much if something is designated to where they're not being effective in a particular context or whatever, because they will expect others to adjust to them, but not for them to adjust to others. So true self-knowledge and true self-awareness backs away from that altogether, and you realize the reason why I need to know this is so that I can understand how I tend to impact people, how other people tend to receive me, what I tend to contribute to a context, and how that if I'm not careful, I can slip into this downside, and I need others to help me understand when I'm doing that. And this gives those people a basis, the people who I'm closest to that I work with, it gives them a basis for being able to say, this is good, but here's something I noticed. Yeah. I noticed that you were tending to slip into your anxious base here, and that's part of what is at work here. So I'm wondering if there's something I can do or say to help you get back to your optimum level of functioning. And I think as long, it's not just the Enneagram, any profile that you take needs to be used in that respect. So, yeah. But I can understand why some people would say, well, it's just, a typical self-absorbed sort of thing, but it's really not intended to be that way.
You need to check a book out like this. Self-awareness, important thing.
Yeah.
Especially those of you who are in ministry, self-awareness is good for being able to help others. Thank you so much.
Yeah. By the way, let me
Chatting.
say.
Here we go. One more.
One more thing.
One more.
This book's really good, but I would also encourage people to read some of the material by the one who taught Cron and Stabile the Enneagram, and that's by Richard Rohr. Richard Rohr, Enneagram, A Christian Perspective, is one of his really good books. But make sure, again, when you take it, take a couple of different versions, read more than just this book, maybe read something by Richard Rohr and others to kind of help you get a picture. Ease into Enneagram slowly. You know, don't just take it quickly and do that. Ease into Enneagram slowly and help it to grow on you. So,
Perfect.
good.
Thanks for joining us.
You bet.
We'll see you next time.
Very good.